Welcome back to another episode of Hot Mess Espresso, guys. We have, God, I don't even know how to describe you because there's just so many ways to do that. But my good friend, witchy mentor, just all around big brother, Auron Stark, is in the freaking studio today, gracing us with his presence. The hell is
Glad to
up?
be here. Thank you for having me.
I'm just glad we were finally able to do this.
I know. What did you say? We've been trying this since last November, right?
Like November. You were supposed to be in season 2, dude.
Oh, are we in season 3 already?
We're in season 5. Actually, this might even be a season 6 episode.
Damn, girl, that just means you're crushing it.
Yeah. So I had a quick question. What because obviously you had all that BS with TikTok, blah 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 blah. What is the arcane artist from?
So as for the few people who might be watching this who remember my early TikToks, my first TikTok, my profile was the original Wicked Wolf. It was a really big account. I think I shot up to 20,000 followers in like a month. I ended up with like over 60. When that account got banned, I found out that like when you try to remake a name for TikTok, once you've been banned, like they'll immediately mark and come after you. So I rebranded and I started the Source Code Healing, which is kind of like, it's just my whole everything that I do. It's like the spiritual stuff that I do, the witchcraft related stuff that I do. I'm also a certified herbalist and meditation teacher. I'm a Reiki master teacher. All of those things kind of came together as, Source Code Healing. I believe that, everything comes from, is what I refer to as the divine source. Some people call it God. Some people worship many gods. Whatever it is, it all comes from, a higher dimension. And that was the whole kind of like, idea behind my branding. And then when that account just recently went down not too long ago, I decided to rebrand again. And the arcane artist. So the word arcane means antiquity, means ancient secret knowledge. And everything that I do in my life is, as you well know, a combination of mind, body, and spirit. I'm also an artist. I went to school for photography and glass blowing, and now I'm predominantly a mixed media artist, painter, and sculptor. And so this new account is me focusing on none of the politics and none of the conspiracy theories and none of the drama and the bullshit. And I'm just doing, the things that I do in my life and sharing that with everybody. And that includes both my spiritual practices, my holistic medicinal practices, and my art life.
Right. And might I add, you are an incredible artist.
Oh, thank you so much. I actually just sold a painting that I've been working on for almost 3 years, and
I was just gonna say, I remember you
yeah,
snapping.
yeah, it was a big heart moment for me because it went to a friend of mine who I didn't even know was into art. He's a contractor guy. He's like the big buff, like let's go out and drink and work hard all week and play hard all weekend kind of guys. And he hit me up on Instagram and was like, "What is it?" Like we were actually talking about bees, and the painting had a bunch of honeycomb patterns in it, and we were talking about bees and like how magical they are and how important they are to life. And then I showed him a couple of pictures that the pieces that I was working on. He's like, "How much is that?" And I was like, "You want it?" He's like, "Yeah." I was like, "It's not done yet." I was like, "But I was like, as soon as I finish it, I was like, I'll let you know." And it took me about another month to get that to that place where I was like, "Ooh, this feels like it's done."
Right.
And he's never been happier. He's like, "It's going up in my living room," and he sent me pictures of it. And I love when that happens, especially like it's cool when strangers buy my art. It's like it feels good to be appreciated, but like when it's somebody that like you have a different relationship with and you don't even know that they're into what you do, and then they're like super supportive. So it was an all around good experience.
I love that so freaking much. So we obviously, with this being a mental health podcast, I've had so many conversations about how witchcraft and spirituality and herbalism and art and all of that ties into mental health. Because I mean, even the most basic mental health practices are like, oh, meditate, ground yourself. That's all witchy shit. So
Well, so it's interesting because the when it comes to mental health, like I'm significantly older than you, so it was a very different world and a very different discussion.
You're not that much older than me.
How old are you?
I'm 32.
Oh, I'm 41. I'm a decade older than you. So,
Oh my god.
and here's the thing: it's like it's not that much older in years, but when you talk about culture, I grew up in. Technically, I'm Gen X because my father was a baby boomer, but I was born in the late '80s. He started late in life as far as having kids, and so I'm that weird generation where I was raised to be a Gen X, but I'm also like I also watched technology evolve, and like all the millennials are like half in my generation. So
Yep.
the mental health conversation was not non-existent when I was younger. Not and I think there's a lot to be said about where we're at in the world in regards to like food and medicine. Like when I was growing up, like you never even heard the word anxiety. Like you might get anxiety over something, a particular thing that you were worried about, like, oh, I have anxiety over this test, or oh, I have anxiety about my job. But like this institutional anxiety that so much of the population seems to have right now, it's like that didn't exist. And these conversations, the trigger warnings, the concept of trigger warnings is so fucking new and so weird to everybody over the age of fucking 35 that it's this constant back and forth. And what I think people have the hardest time understanding is that I don't even like the term mental health, right? Because that separates out, you into compartmentalized, areas. At the end of the day, it's health. And in order to be healthy, you have to have a balance in your mind, you have to have a balance in your physical body, and you have to have a balance in your spirit. And that's to me, though we're moving towards that, right? Like when I was growing up, you had a problem, they threw pills at it, they threw medicine at it, right? And they still do that today, but thankfully because of technology and our access to information, people have a much broader spectrum and a much broader access to all of those other things. Like when you go to a doctor, your doctor is just trying to sell you some pills, right? It's like they've developed a system where you go and see this person for your emotions and your mind, and you go and see this person for problems in your physical body, and you go and see these people for your spiritual stuff. And it's like all of those things need to come together and be integrated for a person to be whole and healthy.
No, I 1000% agree. I mean, back in season 2, I was talking to Amber Bacrae about, the good, the bad, and the ugly about how like your gut health affects your mental health, and obviously there's limitations to that. And we talked about how like you can't, healthy like clean eat your way out of like trauma and trauma responses, but a lot of like your baseline mental goes through your gut. And we live in a country, unfortunately, where there's dyes, there's overprocessed food, there's a lot of these different things.
And you and I can go on for things that are illegal in other countries. It's funny you bring that up, because one of the conversations that's been happening a lot in my circles lately. So my new job, as has me traveling to Puerto Rico, and the people that I'm working for are close soul family, and my two bosses are a married couple, and they have a young 2.5-year-old toddler, and it's like the amount of stuff that's in the food, and not only that, but also the types of food that are available. Puerto Rico is considered part of America, but it's also an island independent thing. And there's products that, like, for example, Goya is a company that sells, Mexican food products. It's beans, rice, juices. You can't get this one type of juice in America. It's called guaynaba, or it's known as it's known by its regular name, soursop. Right? Soursop is a super powerful, naturally antibacterial or antibiotic and anti-parasitic plant. And the juice kills parasites, and the leaf tea kills parasites. And you have to buy it online from vendors outside the country to be able to get something that is in the grocery store in other places, right? Because it's so good for you that it would do things that would mean you don't have to go to the doctor. Like that's the it's really sad, but we grow up in America and I'm a constitutionalist. I'm a patriot. Like, I believe in the rule of law, and I wish the political system worked the way that it was supposed to. But at the end of the day, we're brought up believing that, America's the best country in the world. And when you actually get outside the country and do some exploring, you realize that America is a third world slave ship, and everything here is garbage. The air, the water, the food, all of it. And to speak, on what you were talking about with Amber, I love Amber, by the way. Amber, if you see this, I love and miss you.
She will know exactly what this is about, because
people
we're
don't
all
realize
this
that
tight knit community on TikTok that we've all kind of found each other, and then Auron's he's been on her podcast. We've just all kind of been in this little
we found each other through Hunter, right? I think.
What? I think so. Maybe.
So. Yeah, it's funny. We do have a really great community. But the gut health thing, it kind of ties into, I like to use the analogy of like a grandfather clock, right? If your body is a grandfather clock, right? What does a clock have in it? It has all of these cogs that move and fit together perfectly. One of those cogs is your gut health. One of those cogs is your central nervous system. And so while you're right, you can't eat your way out of traumatic experience that's now embedded in your cellular structure or has caused a permanent reaction with your central nervous system. But by controlling your gut health and making sure that there's not things in, because people don't understand, but the most important chemicals for mental health, serotonin, right? Serotonin is made in your stomach and sent up your vagus nerve to your brain, right? So if your gut health isn't right, then guess what? Then your body's not going to produce the natural things within it to heal it. This is the human body is a magical marvel, and you have all the genetic information to be the perfect version of yourself. It's always there, right? And the only thing that prevents you from manifesting that health is poisons in your food, poisons in your air, poisons in your people think diet's not just about what you put into your body, but it's about what you put into your mind, right? Oh, hey, cat butt. Why do cats always have to show their butts? They're like, hey. Dave Chappelle's got a great skit about how all cats are reincarnated drag queens. And they're just like, who wants to touch Kitty?
Oh my God. But also, saying poisons in food and stuff, dyes. Dyes are not a thing in other countries.
Not only that, people look at what red dye 40 is made out of. They literally take beetles, right? And they take these tiny little beetles and they crush them up, and that's what they make red dye number 40 out of. And it's so you're consuming this pulverized, concentrated shell from a beetle that only grows in a certain part of the world, and it's so processed and so refined and so chemically toxic that especially think about little kids, right? Everything little kids get is bright colored. I grew up. I'm a General Mills cereal guy. We grew up with Captain Crunch and fucking Tony the Tiger and all these cartoon guys on TV that were just convincing us to eat bowls of sugar, right?
Literally.
And here's a real simple fact that will help people understand how bad sugar is for you. And this is coming from a dude with a sweet tooth like a bastard.
I was going to ask you about cane sugar after you finish.
Yeah, so when you, and this speaks to the whole, just how everything is against us, but I feel like me and my friends were the last ones to get a real, proper, decent education. And we used to I remember doing science experiments in 6th grade, right? And you would take this glass of water, and you'd put some salt in it. So we were learning about covalent bonds, which is how electricity travels through liquid, right? So you put salt into the water, and then you run a wire on one side and a wire on the other, and there's a battery on this side and a light bulb on the other. And what happens is the electricity will flow through the saltwater molecules and light up the light bulb, right? But then if you put just a little bit of sugar in there, the glucose will completely neutralize the covalent bonds and the electricity stops flowing. So when people think that, oh, if I eat a Snickers bar, I get a little, I get a pick-me-up, I get a little burst of energy. No, what you're doing is when you put a lot of sugar into your body, you're neutralizing the covalent bonds of the electrical system in your salt water, and then your body crashes, and then that burst of energy you get is actually your backup generator, like the last of the energy in your fucking kidneys, and it bursts into your system. And then what happens is when you get that lull afterwards, it's because you don't have anything left. It's all been fucking, completely depleted. And then when you realize that that's what sugar does to the body, and then you see that the FDA lets them put corn syrup in like you go and get Cheez-Its, which are a salty snack. They're loaded with corn syrup because it's going to make you tired. It's going to make you fat. And when you're tired and fat, what happens? You get sick and things in your body break down, and then you got to go to the doctors.
Yep. They said that, like, probably I've seen some studies, and, like, I can't quote them right now, but the last 30 or 40 years has seen such an increase in autoimmune disorders and diseases. Because
the autoimmune disorders are coming from...
educated enough to have an opinion on that, but I will say a lot of it is coming from the shit that we put in our food, because a lot of stuff isn't homegrown anymore. A lot of stuff is super processed. Yeah. We're not dealing with a lot of that stuff anymore. And like you're an herbalist. We used to, hundreds of years ago, everything, and granted, it's not that autoimmune disorders did not exist before the last 30, 40 years. People did. We just didn't really talk about it. But I'm noticing they're noticing that a lot more, it's becoming more common.
Yeah. When I was growing up, things like when I was growing up, things like autism, things like what did my mother have? Fibromyalgia, like all of these things didn't exist, and you heard about them, but it was like rare. It was 1 in a million. I knew one autistic kid growing up. I knew 2 kids with Down syndrome growing up. Now those numbers have increased 1,000-fold every couple of years since I was a kid. Right. And when you talk about autoimmune diseases, an interesting thing, it ties back to gut health. One of my previous accounts, I was co-hosting a bunch of other podcasts, and I met this woman, Kim Rogers. She's on TikTok. She's amazing. She was in the medical industry. She left because they tried to make her what during when. And her and her husband, they both found they were building a house, and they had well water, and they found out that their well water was infected with parasites and worms. And so she, with her herbal knowledge and knowledge as a registered nurse, started treating her and her husband. And her account blew up. She, built this entire beautiful business around helping people. And people don't realize, but everybody in the Western world, everybody in America, we're all riddled with parasites, right? That fruit juice that I was talking about before, soursop, like you go to other places in the world and they have things in their diet and in their environment that's naturally anti-parasitic and naturally kills worms and parasites. And what science is starting to show is that if you have too many parasites in your body, right? Parasites are living things, and they steal your nutrients, so you're not getting everything that your body needs. And then when they go to the bathroom, their waste is ammonia, right? So if you're overriddled with parasites and they're filling your body with ammonia, guess what that does to your system? It creates an environment that allows cancer to grow. Right. And it's also, we're starting to see that things that we thought were diseases, things like Parkinson's, things like multiple sclerosis, all these things that we thought were diseases, cancer, it's starting to look like they're symptoms. Right? They're symptoms of severe parasitic infection. And then on top of that, when you have issues with parasites, that affects it affects the mind, the body, and the soul, right? Because you've got parasites that are stealing your nutrients and making it so that you're not getting the chemicals that your body needs to produce to keep you healthy. And then that in tune changes your attitude. It changes your perspective. People get angrier when they have parasites. People get depressed when they have parasites. And then all of those things, when those two parts are out of alignment, you can't possibly be, in any positive spiritual place, because you're being dragged down by your negative mentality and your negative physicality.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And like, it's so weird because, like, obviously I grew up in the 90s. Well, like, I was born in 92. So, like, I grew up in the 90s. But, the whole red dye 40 contributing to neurodivergency and making it worse, we all were like, no, it doesn't. That's, like, such a conspiracy theory. Just kidding. It actually makes it, because like I have ADHD, and let me tell you, when I have too many dyes, I cannot focus. I can like I all of my ADHD symptoms are horrible.
Yeah.
So I kind of have to watch what I eat because I like the like I have the podcast, I stream on TikTok, I watch my friends' kids. Like I don't have time to deal with crazy ADHD issues.
Right.
But it's just so weird that like 20 years ago we were like, that's just like a hoax with the red 40 and the blue and the yellow dyes, and now we're just all like,
well, we're at a point
no,
now where
actually.
there's a common phrase that's been going around since probably 2021, right? And it's a funny meme about how it says what's the difference between a conspiracy theory and the truth? And the answer is about 6 months. You know,
Literally.
it's like at the end of the day,
Because like parasites were just like a thing that everyone was like, that's not really a thing. You can't actually have parasites. But then we wind up like deworming cats and dogs. They get parasites.
twice
like,
a year you're supposed to deworm your pets. Guess what? Your pet is an animal, right? This human body is an animal. Like we might have a higher consciousness or an expanded consciousness, but it doesn't change the fact that this body is an animal in this kingdom, right? And if you're gonna take care of your animals that way, but yet you're like, my dog, I have 3 huskies, right? My dogs are in my bed with me, right? My dogs are licking my face. My dogs are fucking playing with their paws. So anything that they're getting, I'm probably getting too. So if I'm going to deworm my dogs twice a year, why wouldn't I do the same for myself? And the truth of it is, humans should actually be deworming. You should do 4 big, 30-day intense detoxifications and anti-parasitic regimens every year, because not only if you have pets are you engaging with that, but like if we just talked about how all of our food is poison, right? The FDA doesn't actually care about us. So the quality of our meat, the quality of our vegetables, they're trying to sell you vegetables that look good, right? Doesn't mean that banana or that pepper or that whatever doesn't have worm eggs in it, doesn't have parasitic eggs in it, right? Pork. How many people do you know that eat bacon? Bacon, you can cook bacon, you can burn bacon and cook it to a high temperature. Still isn't going to kill the fucking worm eggs that are in it when you eat it, that are going to lodge in your intestines and hatch on the full moon.
Gross.
Yeah. Gross.
I love you, but gross. and I know you're speaking like truth, but gross.
Yeah. Yeah, you should see some of the. I encourage everybody to follow, Kim. It's Mrs. Rogers Hood on TikTok. The stories that she gets, like you get on her Instagram, and like there's this one woman, and it's just a photograph, and it's a picture of her feet in the, like she's standing in the shower, and there's a picture of her feet, and in between her feet is a horsehair worm about this fucking long. And she goes, I started my anti-parasite cleanse a couple days ago. She goes, today while I was in the shower, she goes, I sneezed and this came out of my vagina. Like the first anti-parasitic cleanse I did, like literally like had diarrhea for 2 days, and every single time I went to the bathroom and the toilet were egg sacs. It looked like I had eaten a bag of jelly beans, but they were clear. Like, yeah. Every time.
I feel like I'm gonna be traumatized from this episode, but we need to know.
I know, dude. That's what I'm saying. And if anybody wants more information, I highly recommend going to Kim's website, rogershood.com. The Parify kit, it's I think it's like $100 for a month-long kit. Comes with instructions, everything you need. If you use source code, all one word, checkout, you'll get 5% off. I've been an affiliate. I support not only her business model, but I also support her, as an herbalist. Like I know all the stuff that's in her products. She grows and harvests it herself. It's very high quality. The reality of it is the more people we get doing these things, the better off the collective is. Because like let's pivot the conversation a little bit to the spiritual aspect, right? We have now been able to prove scientifically that the spiritual concept of the collective consciousness is real. If you look into this thing that's known as the 100th monkey theory, they figured out that when you have a given population of a conscious being, right, once a certain percentage of that collective knows something, the information gets disseminated to the collective, right? They were doing these experiments studying these monkeys on a group of archipelago islands, and these scientists were taking sweet potatoes and throwing them down to the monkeys, and they loved the sweet potatoes, but they'd get covered in sand and the monkeys would grimace and they'd eat it. And then a couple monkeys started washing them off, and then they showed a couple other monkeys how to wash them off, and then all of a sudden all the monkeys on all the islands that were being studied by other people in the experiment that had no communication, all of a sudden everybody just knew to wash the sweet potatoes off, right? And they Dr. Hagelin did these experiments with the math and the concept of this, right? And what they did was they did this experiment in Washington D.C. where they took what happens is, so if I meditate, I can vibrationally change the person that's closest to me, right? But if you and I meditate, that vibration is gonna reverberate out in a harmonic ratio where it's going to affect the 4 closest people. So if you have 100 people meditating in one room, right, they will vibrate and they will affect the vibrational health of the closest 1,000,000 people. So what they did was they took a group of meditators and they based on previous smaller experiments that they had done, they hypothesized that if you have 100 people meditating in a space 24 hours a day, then it will change the vibration of the closest 1,000,000 people. And they did this experiment in Washington, D.C. in June. And the police chief at the time said it would take, because at the time Washington, D.C. was the most dangerous city in the country when they did this experiment. And he said, we know that we can bring down the violent crime rate in the entire city of D.C. by 20%. And the police chief said, that'll take a foot of snow. In June, to bring down it that significantly, it'll take a foot of fucking snow, right? They did the experiment, and it worked. Like, that's how you know that we're in a control system in every direction, because we know for a fact that all we need is 100 people meditating every single day, 24 hours a day in every major city, and it will completely change the landscape of humanity. People don't realize, but that's why Buddhist monks do what they do. That's why there are Buddhist monks all over the world, because people who are brought up in the monkhood and people who join the ministry of the Buddhists, they know that when they go and they do that they're holding a vibration and changing the world.
That makes so much sense, actually. I always wondered why they did that. Now I know. Yeah.
It's because they understand that reincarnation is real, and they understand that the world needs to be maintained, not just mentally, not just physically, but spiritually. And so those men and women who join those monasteries, that's what they're doing. They're giving themselves over to be in a constant state of positive meditation so that the world doesn't descend into chaos.
Yeah, that would track. So, obviously, like, we kind of went over everything, and you and I could talk for hours. We have talked for hours. Like, we talked.
Especially books, once that new book comes out.
Oh my god.
It comes out near my birthday.
This man got me into Fourth Wing, and, like, I cannot.
I was just telling this story to one of my coworkers. I was like, it was 4 o'clock in the morning, and we were snapping each other, being like, what page are you on? What page are you on? You and I both finished both of those books in like 9 days.
I literally, somehow, you had gotten 20 pages ahead, and you were literally snapping me every 5 minutes. Like, are you there yet? Are you there yet? Are you there? I'm like, I literally...
I wanted to talk about what I knew, but I didn't want to ruin it for you.
Oh, so I reached the end of King Iron Flame, and I just literally snapped you, and I go, what the fuck was...
I can't wait.
There were a couple times that I snapped you, and I was literally like...
In tears?
Hang on, I'm going to hyperventilating? Or the times that I was just like, hang on, I'm going to be a few pages behind, I just threw the book.
Yeah.
And you're just like, you got to that scene, didn't you?
I know exactly what page you threw the book at.
Because you knew I was like 40 pages behind, and then I'm just like, hang on, it's going to take me a minute. I threw the book, I had to walk out of the room, and you're like, oh, you got to that part. I'm like, yes, I did.
I've got a couple new recommendations for you, too.
Oh,
yeah.
Are they going to shatter my conscience?
No, they won't. So far, There's one series that I'm halfway through that I'm going to recommend, and then the other one is a standalone. And when it ends, not only does it end really well, and you're super fucking happy with the way it ends, but it will benefit your perspective on magic and religion in a way that I don't think anything else could.
Yeah, you will be texting those to me after.
Oh, absolutely.
Oh my God. But just to kind of like wrap this up, mind, body, spirit. What is one mind, one body, and one spirit that people can start doing today that's going to help propel them into a better mindset and lifestyle?
Like there's a lot of simple things. Yeah, there's a lot of simple things that people can do, right? So when it comes to, strengthening and focusing on your mind, do something that challenges you intellectually, whether it's reading a book, whether it's doing a crossword puzzle, whether it's playing a game of solitaire, right? The only thing that matters when it comes to bettering yourself and expanding in these areas of your life is the most important thing is to start. And you don't have to do something big, with spirituality. I always said meditation, right? And people are always intimidated by meditation because they have these preconceived notions about, oh, I need to be a Buddhist monk, or I need to do this, or I need to do that. And meditation can be as simple as setting a timer for 5 minutes and doing nothing but breathing really, really deeply in through your nose, holding it, and exhaling through your mouth, right? And then holding your lungs empty, and then doing that type of breathing for 5 minutes. That does something really interesting and unique, because that'll stimulate your mind, because you're counting and focusing on just doing the breathing while simultaneously connecting you energetically to spirit, and then also regulating your central nervous system and your immune systems.
I was going to say, doesn't it do something for your parasympathetic nerve?
Yeah, no, that's what people. It's interesting. So I don't know if you were ever a smoker, but I was a cigarette smoker for a long time, and it's people. Anybody who's ever been a cigarette smoker knows that, like, when something bad happens or when you get stressed out, you got to go out for a cigarette, and everybody thinks that the nicotine is what's making you feel better. But what's actually making you feel better is that when you have a negative experience, you remove yourself from the experience, you go outside, and then you spend 10 minutes doing deep fucking breathing. Because how do you smoke a cigarette? You hit that shit, you breathe it all the way in, you hold it for a second, you taste it on your lips, you know what I mean? So what's actually happening is you're resetting your central nervous system by doing deep breathing. And then you're also giving yourself nicotine, which nicotine, the molecule, is the same shape as the serotonin molecule. So it sits into your serotonin receptors and it makes you feel good. Yeah. So, and then as far as stuff physically for the body, I always encourage people to just get physical, right? And it doesn't matter what it is, right? Like, everybody, again, they get intimidated by physical exercise. They get intimidated by working out. And if you don't work out at all, guess what? You do one push-up, you did more than you did the day before. And it can be that simple. You can do one push-up, you can do one sit-up, and then write it down. Today I did one sit-up, right? And then the next day, do 2 fucking sit-ups. You know what I mean? It doesn't matter how little you start, and it doesn't matter how slow you go. It just matters that you make the choice to do it and then follow through. And that's with all 3 things. You got to do that mentally, you've got to do it spiritually, and you've got to do it.
Yeah, because you're not, and I can say this as somebody that has been semi-consistent in the gym for about 4 years. Mm-hmm. I have completely reshaped how my body looks, how I handle things, and the size I can maintain. Mm-hmm. But that is because I have been going to the gym for 4 years. You are not going to sit there and hit a few workouts and drop a bunch of weight and call it a day. I think people need to give themselves more time and more grace to that stuff. It has to become a habit. It has to become more of a lifestyle. It has to be. Yeah. But again, start with one push-up, one sit-up. I
do a lot of private coaching work, and I do a lot of private counseling work. And the one thing that all my clients always hear me say, it's fucking baby steps, right? It's about, like you said, because you're never gonna get a pattern. You're never going to establish a routine if you don't start somewhere, right? And I, I love that you brought up the whole weight thing, right? So like I've been both, in amazing shape and sexy and almost had a six pack and strong, and I've also been really overweight multiple times in my life. I struggled with bulimia when I was a college athlete. I struggled with bulimia in high school. I had a lot of weight issues and a lot of health problems that were connected to that that I didn't even know where they were connected, and what I can say is that as somebody who, I love the gym, I love going to the gym, I love working out at the gym, and a lot of people will have a hard, like, they don't want to go to the gym. They feel self-conscious. They feel uncomfortable, right? And I can tell you, as somebody who's been a gym rat most of my life, when I see somebody in the gym who's like really overweight, or when I see somebody who's really unhealthy, obviously, right? And I see them in the gym, I don't judge that person negatively like they might think everybody around them is judging them. The
No, they're
first
doing
thought that
more
comes to
than
my
most
mind,
people.
first thought that comes to my mind is good for you. Is good for you because you fucking showed up. There was there's a I forget what podcast I saw it on. It's probably a Joe Rogan episode, but they were talking about setting those goals and setting those patterns.
Yeah.
And he talked about this trainer was talking about a client that he had, and he goes, my client every day for 30 days, all he did was get up and he got his shoes on and he went to the gym and he went to one machine and he did one exercise and then he went home. And he did that every day for 30 days. And you know what? Now the pattern of getting up, getting dressed, and going to the gym, that pattern's set. And then he started expanding on his workouts. And then he started doing a little more exercise. And then he started, and then the happy ending of the story is this man who was 300 plus pounds is now in the best shape of his life. He's happy. He's healthy. He has a new wife. He had, it's like all these things that he was sad and depressed about and thought he was never going to have. He thought he was never going to be healthy. He thought he was never going to be attractive. He thought he was never going to find anybody to love him. It started with 10 minutes a day. Get dressed, drive to the gym, go in and do something, and fucking leave. And once he built that pattern, then because you have to build the pattern to be able to expand on the pattern.
Yeah. So one more question before you leave.
Yeah, of course.
What is your go-to when you are just down in the dumps? What is your go-to quick fix? What is the one thing that is automatically gonna make your day?
Honestly, walking. Walking is getting outside of I'm a remote worker. I work from home. I'm an artist. I work in my studio. Like my whole life is in the four walls of my house, right? And when I find myself getting emotionally depressed, or I find myself having more anxiety than I should, or any of those things, that's when I realize I'm like, oh, I'm going to take my dogs for a walk. I'm going to get outside the four walls of my house. I'm going to get some fresh air. I'm going to spend some time with my animals. I'm going to do something. The biggest thing when it comes to mental blockages is getting out of where you're at. Like literally physically getting out of where you're at. If you're in bed and you're depressed, get the fuck out of your bed, right? If you're depressed when you're at work, take a personal day from work and get out and do something that means something to you. If you're, I just recently, I know you're dealing with similar stuff right now. I recently had a really horrible and traumatic loss in my life, right? And I was grieving in a way that I've never grieved before because I was dealing with the loss of something so unexpected and so out of my just anything I thought would ever happen. And it's like I literally just got out and walked to the lake. I got out, sometimes you don't even have to go and do something. Just get outside, right? Sit outside in the sunlight, sit outside in the rain, sit outside and get that fresh air and remove yourself from the place that you're physically associating with that depression or with that anxiety or with that whatever issue it is that you're dealing with, because those emotions and those feelings are trapped in our body. And then if our body doesn't move, we start to imprint those emotions and those feelings with our environment. So the most important thing is to remove yourself from that environment, even if it's just for, 15, 20 minutes. And I'll also say grounding, right? Get outside for 15 minutes a day and put your fucking feet on the ground. Physically connect to the earth. The things that it does to your body physically, mentally, and emotionally is so important. It's so important to connect to the earth. It's so important to discharge all of the negativity, all of the emotion, all of the stress. It's people don't realize, but that 15 minutes a day, you can tag team it while you're standing on the ground, touching the earth. You can be doing your deep breathing, or you can be reading. You know what I mean? It's the thing that I think is most frustrating with the current state of our overall health is that people think that those things are separate, and they're not. And when you're doing something for your body, you're also benefiting your mind and your spirit. When you're doing something for your mind, you're also benefiting your spirit and your body, right? These are all, when you start to realize that they're all always connected, then you realize that every little thing you do is so much bigger and more beneficial than you even think in the moment that you're doing it.
Thank you so much for having on. I'm so glad you were finally able to do this.
Thank you for having me. I'm so glad that we finally got to do this too. And let's plan a bigger, more involved conversation again soon.
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. I love you. Thank you everybody for stopping in and watching. You can find me on TikTok, the.arcane.artist. You can also find me on Instagram. I think it's, I don't know what my Instagram is right now because I just changed that.
I'll find it and put it in the
description. All my stuff will be in the places where the things are.
Where the things. Well, I love you.
Have an amazing night, and we'll talk soon.